Most of your identity wasn't chosen by you. It was installed by brands, by fandoms, by the company you work for, by the tech stack you learned first. And once it's in there, it runs your behavior, whether you're aware of it or not. You tied yourself to puppet strings. Across my career, one pattern keeps showing up. People skills shape long-term success. I've seen it in high-stakes technical work, leadership, business, and family life. This channel is about solving the people puzzle. Before I get into the stories, I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing when I say identity. I don't mean personality. I don't mean reputation. I mean the internal answer to the question, who am I? The labels you carry around for yourself that you don't really think about anymore. Things like, I'm an engineer, I'm a runner, I'm a Star Wars person, I'm a Mac guy. Those labels aren't just descriptions. Research in identity psychology tells us they function more like a behavioral operating system. Once something is part of your identity, your brain starts using it as a standard, checking your behavior against it, generating discomfort when you fall short of it, pulling you toward actions that confirm it. That's why identity is so powerful, and that's why it matters a lot what you let in. I want to start with two stories from my own life where I let something into my identity and didn't notice the cost until it had already been running up a tab for years. Because here's the thing, your identity doesn't ask permission. You take up a new hobby, or your parents take you to a ball game, or someone gives you a cat mug as a gift and now everyone thinks you're into cats, so now you think you're into cats. Identity doesn't announce itself. It just quietly starts shaping what you do, what you avoid, and what you feel guilty about. And if what you let in came from someone else's franchise, a brand, a fandom, an ideology, then part of that shaping is happening according to their agenda, not yours. For about 10 to 15 years, I was an avid kite guy. I flew kites, I built kites, I competed with kites. My vacations revolved around kite festivals. I would travel to kite festivals 2 or 3 times a year. I spent thousands of dollars on kites and kite materials, hundreds of hours of time doing kites. It's basically what I did. I flew kites every chance I could get, even when conditions didn't support it. Oh, there's a couple puffs of wind. Let's run out and grab the kite. Oh, puffs of wind went away. Oh, there's a couple puffs. Let's go fly a kite. And then kids came along. I really wanted to get my kids into kiting, but they just weren't capable of it. They're tiny little kids. I no longer had the time or the money to be going to kite festivals all the time. I couldn't travel in the off season because of school schedules. Things were much more expensive in the summer. And it just kind of couldn't get to it. And so what happened? The kites started collecting dust in the basement. I'd walk past them. Every time I saw them, I'd feel guilty. I really need to get back to it. I really need to get out there. I should be out flying kites. And just for years, I would see this stuff. And one of these days, I need to get back to this. I need to get back to this. Kites were part of my identity, and I wasn't flying the kites. So I wasn't being myself because I wasn't flying the kites. So let me give you another example. For many years of my life, I was really into the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Not just Lord of the Rings, but all the other stuff. We're talking Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, Unfinished Tales, the multi-volume history of Middle-earth that really gets into the academia of it. I was deep down the rabbit hole. A friend and I had a friendly rivalry for who knew more minutia about the names and the events and the artifacts spanning the thousands of years of lore. I would read and reread and reread constantly so I could keep up my cred as a Tolkien nerd. And then one day I realized I knew more about the socio-political situation in Beleriand following the Dagor Aglareb than I knew about the events leading up to World War I. And one of these actually affects the world I'm living in. These stories, and others, taught me to question when community and fan identities were serving me. Sometimes I outgrew them. Sometimes I realized they were taking an outsized portion of my resources. Identities can distract or cage you over time. So at this point, you might be thinking, whoa, identities are traps. I should just not have any. That's not where I'm going. The same mechanism that made me haul kites to festivals I didn't have time for and memorize the political geography of a fictional continent, that same mechanism can work for you instead of against you. The difference isn't the mechanism. The difference is whether you chose it or it just happened. Intentional identity adoption is different from accidental adoption. And I want to show you 2 examples where I've done it on purpose and what that actually looks like in practice. There's an event called the RPM Challenge, Record Production Month. The challenge is to record an album of original music in February. I started doing this back in 2007, and I've done it every year since. But in recent years, it started feeling kind of pointless, like something I was doing just to do it. So as I hit February for what would be my 20th RPM challenge, I really started to question whether I should even do it. Is this something I should keep in my identity? Ultimately, I made a conscious effort to retain this identity. I realized that it provided one of my few targeted creative outlets that didn't also have some kind of profit motive. So for my 20th RPM challenge, I broke out 20 instruments that had been gathering dust and recorded a live improvised concert with anecdotes on February 28th. The music sucked, but I celebrated the joy the process gave me. I celebrated the identity. When it was done, it felt right. Now here's another example, and this one runs very close to that line of potential control through a franchise. I got into K-pop via a group called ITZY. I got very into K-pop. I intentionally made K-pop part of my identity. I like lots of groups, but I'm particularly a huge fan of ITZY, which makes me a midzy. In fact, I am a card-carrying 4th generation midzy, and I'm in the top 0.5% of ITZY YouTube viewers worldwide. I may have legitimately skewed the metrics enough that they put a billboard in my town a mile from my house to advertise their last tour. This means I spend money on albums, light sticks, concerts. It started to clutter up my house with stuff. Why do I allow this as part of my identity? ITZY always seems to have the song I need at the time I need it. As I tried to navigate social VR while I was still terribly socially awkward, Wannabe reminded me to be myself. As a new project manager, leading customer meetings and being the face of the company for the first time, ITZY told me I was born to be and untouchable. When I was drowning in too many commitments, ITZY told me to focus on my level up and get tunnel vision. A well-chosen identity can feed your core values. Music and movement is a core part of my identity, not just a surface value, and the RPM Challenge serves this. ITZY's music empowers me by speaking to some of my core values: being brave and expressing yourself, strong work ethic, self-confidence with a bit of swagger earned through accomplishment, relentless focus on being the best at what you do. Identities can help drive your behavior. Franchises can provide role models. I'm a musician. I can get on stage and perform. ITZY gets up there and performs for thousands of people, yet they have their own anxieties and insecurities. If they can do that, I can do the much less stuff I'm trying to do. So here's where I land on this. Identity is going to happen to you whether you participate in it or not. The question isn't whether you have identities. You do, and you always will. The question is which ones you chose, which ones just accumulated, and whether the ones you're carrying are pulling you toward who you want to become or holding you in place. The kites were guilt I was paying on an identity I'd outgrown. The Tolkien deep dives were attention I was spending on someone else's world instead of my own. The RPM Challenge is a creative commitment I've chosen to keep because it feeds something real in me. And Midzy, that one earns its place because it models exactly the kind of courage and discipline I'm trying to build in my own work. Same mechanism, very different results. Your identity is running right now. The only question is whether you're the one programming it. If this landed for you, I'd love for you to stick around. Hit like and subscribe, because this is actually the first of 2 videos on identity. The next video tackles the other side of this. What happens when you want to change who you are, but it feels like you'd be selling out? If identity can trap you or propel you, the follow-up is about how to change direction without losing yourself in the process. And if you want this kind of thing in written form, something you can reference later, there's a link to my newsletter in the description. Drop a comment too. What identity are you carrying right now that might be due for a second look?